So let's look at this idea, the idea of backstepping. Now, the idea of backstepping, anytime he's got my lower leg controlled like this and we're passing, I can always just take my leg, pummel my shoelaces over the top of his, and I'm pretty much halfway into a leg entanglement. So I can go back into leg attacks. And what Gordon did very well in the match with Suppo was he decided that he didn't want to have to make this an extended long match. He wanted to get him out of there. And obviously leg locking is a way that he can deal with a lot of guys in general with how good his leg locking is, but particularly big guys. And Suppo actually showed really good leg lock defense up until the point that he got caught. But what Gordon decided to do was go between the threat of passing and the threat of going back into the legs. So that's something that we need to remind ourselves. Sometimes we get so focused on passing, we forget that there's opportunities in the lower body. So all we're going to do is just going to put our hands on the ground and we're just going to pummel our shoelaces. So we're not going to do a big back step. All we're going to do is pummel our shoelaces and basically kind of connect your heel and your toes together. And then we're just going to straighten our leg till our knee goes past his knee. And now I can start to move myself towards him. Now be careful. I don't want to stay up here in line with his upper body. He can start to reach up and connect to me here, and this can become a real pain in the ass. Okay, there's a bunch of different variations of kata gatame he can do. So what I'm going to say to you is this. When you go to your back step and you start to make the pummel, start to move your body away from his head as soon as you possibly can. Now, the only disadvantage of this is if he starts to come up into you, you have to be careful about him knocking you over on your shoulder, getting up onto his legs, and you end up in a bottom position. So I don't really want that to happen. So if I stay head over head on him here, it's hard for him just to get up because he's kind of stuck. The more I go this direction, the more he can come up on me if I'm not careful. So let's just consider that, right? I don't want to just go to my shoulder here, and then he just keeps his legs locked. He gets up to his knees, comes up, yep, keep coming, and now we end up in something like this. This is a poor exchange. So from this position here, as I come back, we're going to look at taking the secondary leg. So I'm going to reach down to the secondary leg, and I'm just going to focus on widening my knee and trying to pin his hips. So if Dave tries to come up into me, he's got to kind of heist his knees back underneath himself to get up on top position. And I'm just going to pull up this secondary leg. So as Dave tries to get onto me now and knock me over, it's kind of difficult for him. If I fall down onto my shoulder here and he can come up and bring his hips past his knee line, he can start to come up on top of me. So I don't really want that to happen. So I'm trying to keep this right knee widened, pinning his hips, lifting the leg to some degree, and I'm effectively pinning Dave from a top cross-ashy position here. And then from here, we're going to look at sitting down onto our butt. So from here, I'm going to sit back. Now, when you sit back, be careful. If you have your secondary leg out long, you kind of go over your own leg. So just windscreen wipe your leg. So as I fall, my leg goes underneath him, and we end up falling like this. My elbow goes to the mat between the two ankles, and we've got double trouble. So let's look from a different angle. Basic backstepping series. We were passing, and he either reclaimed the lower leg, or maybe we're passing through, and this is where we've ended up. I'm just going to put my hands on the mat, and I make a very short pummel like so. As soon as I start to straighten my leg, because if he tries to reach up for my head here, it's not the end of the world. But as soon as I start to straighten to claim the knee line, I start to take my head away. If I take my head away too far and I fall down, he comes up. We've just talked about that. So I'm going to stay here at about 90 degrees. I'm going to reach for the secondary. You'll find he'll have his legs crossed in this fashion. If he has his legs crossed the other way, he's got to be careful because you can start to take heel exposure from here. So you're going to find they'll lock their legs where their secondary locks over the primary. I'm just going to come down with an Achilles grip, like so. If Dave starts to try and come up into me, I'm going to keep him pinned with a widening of the knee and a lifting of the foot. Now when I sit back, I don't just go over my ankle. I windscreen wipe on my ankle, I fall towards my elbow, and then we sit through to here into what we call double trouble. Get a partner? Let's give it a go. I came up specifically in the match with Suppo and Gordon. Suppo started to wrestle up on Gordon. Gordon sagged over the top of him here and went to a position like this. And then Suppo started to swim between the legs, which is not a bad idea to start to backdoor it. Now, this takes away all the upper body ability for me to attack here. But what I can also always do is just step my foot back in, widen, and then we're back to where we just looked at before. And this is what Gordon did in the match. And he just did a good job of threatening between the idea of passing, and then if that wasn't there, moving back into attacking the lower body. And as the man on bottom, if you get someone who goes between these two things, this is actually a really difficult prospect. Also consider any time you come up here. You go for a Kimura or something. The guy locks in, he's been really difficult. All you have to do is limp your foot in and then you're back down into the legs. Okay, so this progression of going from up in a north-south type position back to the legs is really nice. Then we just do the same thing we looked at before. We start to come in here, we look for the secondary leg, we're lifting everything up and widening, and then from here we sit back. Remember, when I sit back, my elbow goes between his ankles. So we sit through here, and we come into a position that looks like this. So my elbow's between his ankles versus my elbow being like this where his feet are parallel. It's a little easier for him to extract. When you take both of the legs and you lace them like this, it's just substantially harder for him to deal with. So this time we're going to do, we won't put too much time into that, but just another way to get into this double trouble position. So we've gone into a pass situation. Maybe he's wrestled up, it doesn't matter. I've sagged over the top here and he's gone between. Right, before he gets a chance to whip over to a turtle, all I'm going to do is just limp my foot into the middle and start to go down. I'd love to just take the primary and heel hook him, but he's going to lock up and then we end up in a position like this. Now, if you feel like collapsing over your own leg is difficult, you can always head roll. As he comes up onto you, you can place your head on the mat and you'll end up in the same position. Okay, so don't freak out thinking you've always got to pull them back over the top of yourself. You can also head roll. So one last time, I come past his guard here. I start to top spin, the arms come in. We're just going to limp our lower leg in between his legs and start to go down the body. He locks his legs up. The other way. Thank you. From here, if I feel like I'm having a hard time pulling him backwards because he's coming into me, I can head roll. Instead of falling to bottom, I put him through, and now we're back in the same spot. Let's give it a go. I'm going to allow you to use either of those entries. You're either going to back step or we're going to go into the legs from the north-south position. Now, just a small detail here. If I start to backstep here and he straightens both his legs before I can claim them, there's nothing wrong with you coming back out and then going back into top positions. Now, if you've given up the underhook, you might find you have to sag over the top. And then you can see how things can start to go back into what we looked at before, right? So either way, we end up here and we're into a double trouble. I wrap up the secondary leg, so it's hard for him to move. Now, if I can just take the primary, this is definitely not bad, but just keep in mind, anytime we don't have a secondary, his job is to turn out. So we start rolling. If he does a good job of hiding, now we start to go here, and then we go into endless rolls. So remember, today's session was looking at what does Gordon do in these situations. Well, he kind of does what we looked at pretty extensively for a while, which is the idea of threatening what we call lateral knee bars, where he pulled the primary leg sideways to break him, and then passes it to the outside. So really what he's doing here is something that we've been doing for a while. It's just the leg positioning that's interesting, and that's what we're going to play around with. So let's think about this. What we know about inside Senkaku is that it's great if you can get the primary exposed. This is a great breaking position, right? Really good. But people aren't spuds with leg lock defense anymore. And they know once the secondary goes, there's nothing stopping him from starting to go into turnouts, and heel exposure becomes hard. And as we start to go, there's back exposure and there's a whole bunch of things, losing knee lines. So today's whole thing is going to be the idea of obviously maintaining double trouble initially so that he can't just start to go into turnouts. We know that's what he wants. Then the idea is going to be going into a lateral knee bar and passing the leg. So I'm going to show you a lateral knee bar first, and then we'll go into the passing of the leg. So all we're going to do, we're just going to fall down on our side here and hit this pin that we looked at before. So we're in this position. Then we're going to start to look at reaching and claiming the toes of the primary like this, because I know he wants to turn out. So I'm going to pull his toes towards me. And then what I'm going to start to do is just open my chest and allow him to remove. And he won't be able to help himself. He'll be like, he doesn't want to be stuck in double trouble. You give him a little bit of room, he'll take the secondary out. But what this does now is it allows me to transfer his foot across to the center of my chest, and I can take both hands like this. I want to pull his foot in a position where I'm flexing his toes towards his knee. So his foot is bent as much as possible versus being straight. And I pin everything down into my chest here. I'm going to lock my legs. I'm going to turn my hip over the top of the knee, and then I'm going to start to extend through. And it's very much like a heel hook. I just can't get the same lift that I can, so I don't get the rotational pressure mixed with the shearing force. It's effectively just a knee bar sideways through the side of the knee, but it's definitely effective. Be careful with your training partner, this will hurt them. All right, so first thing we're going to do is this. Now there's ways he's going to defend that, but this is what we're going to start with here. So this deals with the turnout. When Dave tries to hit a turnout from here, he can't because he needs to point his toes, take his knee down and start to go. As long as I can keep everything flexed back in, so the big detail is pulling everything back towards him. If his foot straightens here, you can try and pull on this and he'll start to turn out. He'll be able to turn out, and yep, that's what'll happen. So you need to get this flexion in the foot. Now from here, when he tries to turn out, it's very difficult. And now we can go into braking. So let's look again. We're up here, we've got double trouble, and we sit down here and we've got this leg, the leg pinned. We're gonna start to reach for the toes and pull them back. And then I'm gonna start to recline and kind of open my chest and give him his leg. From here, I'm gonna pull to the center of my chest, lock everything in, and then I start to go through for the brake. Let's give it a go. I really don't know how to deal with it. But what you're gonna get is a very, what's the word I want? We'll go from here. A very predictable response. And that's always good in jiu-jitsu if I can get predictable responses. So I come down here, I reach over the top, I widen and I allow this to go. Look what I'm doing here. I allow this to go over the top of my other arm. And I start to then bring my hand out and lateral knee bar. Now you might not even decide to stop at the lateral knee bar. That's the other thing. You don't have to start to put pressure on this. You can always just go to the immediate pass, okay? And that's what we're gonna do now. So don't think it has to work in this sequence of lateral knee bar, then pass. You also can just pass it immediately. So let's just look at the way we pass again. You end up going over this Achilles grip arm. So just watch what I've got here. I'm here pinning. He can't go anywhere. As long as I'm on your testicles? Sorry. So I widen this here, and then when he tries to come into me, it should be hard. All right, I don't want to lean here, and then he starts to do that high sting thing we spoke about earlier. So in a position like this, I start to reach down for the toes, and I pull everything in. He's trying to go into turnouts. He wants to extract the secondary and go into turnouts. I widen, I go here, it goes over the top, over the top, over the top, and then I C-post. So I go to here. You can even come and lock a triangle at this stage, all right? We're gonna lock a triangle and just squeeze our knees. Then from here, I'm gonna let go of the toes, and I'm gonna make a pummel here. So I've got a C-post, which is stopping him from turning out. I'm kind of putting his foot high. I pummel till my elbow passes his Achilles, and now my hand starts to rise and I start to go to here. He'll want to turn his knee in, all right? He'll feel pressure on the side of his leg if that's not the case. And we end up in a position like this. Now, I don't have secondary leg control anymore. And what we've got to think, and this is what Gordon's very good at, and I think also his length works for him here. What Dave needs to do is Dave needs to get off my left foot and pummel his feet to the inside to start to get himself free here. If Dave just tries to turn but leaves himself locked up here, he gets jammed up. And this is what, if you watched Gordon versus Pedro Moreno, this is what happened at the, was it 2019 Worlds? Yeah, and Pedro just tried to turn out with the legs locked. Gordon caught the heel and he broke him on the way. Now, what we need to do is we need heel exposure. If Dave turns in and defends by doing this, he gives me heel exposure. He's got to be very careful. And this is the other thing with the heavyweights. A lot of the heavyweights don't have the flexibility to pull their knee up to their chest. Like what Dave's doing there is actually not as easy as it looks. So definitely smaller weight divisions have a better ability to pummel their feet back inside than bigger weight divisions. So this could be another reason why he really has so much success with big guys with this, because they don't have that dexterity. So if they don't have the dexterity, because Dave could have his leg fairly turned this way and still make that pummel, all right? But again, when you try this in a moment, you're gonna find unless you've got crazy hip flexibility, that's actually quite hard. So what most people wanna do is they wanna start to cause a reap, and now this pummel becomes a lot easier. Okay, so if we understand that, we go, well, okay, a reap gives me heel exposure, but it also starts his exit strategy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just start to lean everything out to the outside here like this. So as he now tries to make that pummel, it's substantially harder. Even Dave with his flexibility, that's tough. Okay, so now what I'm gonna look at trying to do is I'm gonna widen this knee to pin his hip. Okay, I don't mind him going this direction. I don't want him to go this direction. Okay, I don't want him to unpummel this leg entanglement. So we end up in this position. So what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna play around with this. I want to put a lot of weight down into the top of his quadricep. So the way we're gonna do that is by doing a left extension. So I'm doing a left leg extension, and now from here I'm gonna start to look at trying to expose the heel. So I'm extending the legs the whole time, exposing the heel. You okay?
Yeah, it's feel good.
What does that hurt?
It's like quad.
Yeah, it'll just, but what that tells me is I'm putting weight, I'm using my right shin as a bar pushing down into his quadricep. If I'm pushing into his quadricep, his femur connects to his hip and his hip gets jammed on the mat. And that's what we want here. I haven't spoke to Suppo, but I'm sure he probably felt he was kind of stuck in the mat at the time, like he couldn't move too much. That's what we're trying to do here. All right, he wants to come out here, start to now turn, start to pummel, and now we're just in a standard reap. All right, we don't really want that. I think Gordon might even call this like inside Ashi, I think he refers to this as. With this inside Ashy, I don't really want him to be turning out on me, even though that does give me heel exposure. So look what we're doing here. I'm kind of extending this. I'm going to come up this direction, and I'm going to go here, extending and widening the knee like this. Now we're going to work on exposure. Dave's going to hide his heel by pointing his toes and hiding, and we're going to just start to look at lifting, 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 and catching with high hands here, like so. Now for the break, I'm going to start to drive my hips through as I pull the heel back. All right, so let's have a look at this from the beginning. We're here, double trouble with the legs laced up like so. He can't go anywhere until I choose. I start to take the toe line, I go to the floor, and I open my chest up, allowing him to remove his leg. Immediately, I go 1, C-post. Now this second one either comes over or under, I'll leave it up to you, but I go here and I wedge and I start to go here. I don't want him to turn out on me. So as soon as I get to here, I lock and I start to take everything over this direction. And now I'm going to start to extend, putting a bar across the leg. Dave's going to be trying to turn everything back into a turnout, and I'm going to be trying to stop that. Then he decides he can't turn that way, so he starts to hide his heel. I lift, I catch high hands, and then from here I go into break. Let's give it a go. And force me this way. Go. Force. Try and force me that way. I think you can just use a posted hand if they try and take you. Try that. Try that with him. If you feel like you're going to fall, so don't just go down your head and let him roll you through. Post your hand and use that to turn both of you back to a neutral position. Yeah.
It'd be more this than it would be this. This doesn't really achieve. It doesn't achieve anything because your knee's in the same spot.
But yeah, if you need to, if you feel him going, like pushing you, just put the right hand on the mat and just post with your right hand. The actual mechanics of breaking someone properly here. So we'll just go into the position. So we'll refer to this as an inside Ashy with a figure 4. Okay, so just remember the only difference between this and inside Senkaku is the fact that the leg's been passed. So just keep that in mind. And I'm extending and widening. I'm coming out here for the dig. So I'm getting out onto my hip here and I start to pull this up and I get the foot nice and high and the hands nice and high. From here, if he's got a very straight leg and he could slip his knee and turn it inwards to me, he puts me into like knee bar territory. So I'm going to make sure I widen my legs so I can always control that basically I've got my groin and hip connected to the outside or the inside of his knee in this case, sorry. So where his MCL is, so that I can push throughout the side of his LCL here. Now, if you feel like the leg's very straight, sometimes that can be hard for heel hooks. So I'm going to lift the heel, I'm going to just go on my shoulder and put a bit of a bend in the leg. And as Dave tries to straighten his leg, it's actually pretty hard because I'm kind of using my hip to lift this up at the same time. So I go in like so. Remember, my heel hooking hand, which is my bottom hand, is always supported by the secondary hand, not the other way around. So I'm lifting this up. Now from here, I don't want to fall down onto my head. There's not really a need for this. I'm going to keep the hands very high. So just as I lift the hands, that's hurting Dave's ankle. Yeah. Now to get the break through the knee, I won't lift the heel as high. I start to drive my hip through the side of the knee. Were you saying something? No. So I start to drive through the side of the knee. Now, if I lift the heel and I do that together, this is where we start to get good pressure. So the mechanic for breaking is that. So we're not going to allow everything to turn this direction. We've agreed that we think that this leads us to chasing. And that's going to happen. But if we're really working this whole just complete control with this position, I pull the leg, I pass it to the center, and everything comes out this direction here, and I extend and widen. Dave's giving me his heel. If they give you the heel, great. Most people probably don't want to give you the heel. They're going to play a game of trying to defend their heel by pointing their toes and hiding. If he just turns his knee inwards because he doesn't like the pressure of this, just do that for me, Dave. If he does this, he's going to give you easy exposure. So he's going to hide the heel. Your job is to lift the foot, hide it as best as possible. Start to lift, start to expose the heel and catch. My hands come in, I lift, my hips go through, and we start to go for the break, all right? So let's just do 2 or 3 reps of the breaking mechanics each, and then we'll train. Let's go.